Not many Maltese know that among the Australian and New Zealand troops known as Anzacs in the First World War, there were a few Maltese as well. Today we're with Dr. Gioconda Schembri, who will be talking about a publication that is coming out most probably later on this year.
My book is called Three Anzacs from Malta, and as the name suggests, it tells the story of three young Maltese men who in 1911 and 1912, because they came into separate groups, they migrated to Australia. They had actually met at the Lyceum in Malta, so they were friends, and then they entered university, and in fact they studied architecture. However, unfortunately, after they graduated, they couldn't find any work in Malta, so they set their sights further afield, and they came to Australia. They settled in Perth, and there at first they had a few teething problems because their university qualifications unfortunately were not recognized. But slowly but surely they managed to settle down, secure good jobs, make new friends, and also fall in love. However, unfortunately, their carefree days were not to last because their lives were overshadowed by events beyond their control.
Now, what made you want to publish this publication? Why? Because this is your first publication, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Well, these three men really captured my heart. And because, like me at a young age, they packed their bags and they took the plunge to find greener pastures elsewhere. So I really wanted to give them a voice, to tell their story. Also, I think when we talk about wars, and in this instance the First World War, we talk about statistics, and statistics reduce people to numbers. Whereas these people, these young men, were men of flesh and blood.
So is this book about their story, about their migration story, or is it about their Anzac adventure? Well, let's not call it an adventure, but their Anzac experience.
It actually covers a bit of everything. In fact, it starts from their childhood all the way their migration story, as well as their experience during the war and afterwards.
And I know that you have managed to even contact their families, and you spent time with their families. How was that for you as the author of this book, and also for them meeting you, who is writing, you know, the author who is writing the actual story?
It was amazing, and I don't think it was a coincidence that I managed to trace the families. I had come across the names of Charles Valdemar and Anthony in the book by the late John Mitzi, Gallipoli, The Malta Connection. But there was only a small paragraph about them, and they really intrigued me, and I wanted to know more. I contacted the National Archives in Canberra, and I got their service record. And from there, I managed, that's where all the contacts and links started. For instance, in Valdemar's service record, there was a letter by a lady called Barbara Gugeri, who lived in Perth. Now, Gugeri is not a very common surname, so what I did, I went to the phone directory and I wrote to the few Gugeris that were listed.
Back to the basics, yeah?
That's right. And bingo, I was lucky because one of them actually put me in contact with the niece of Valdemar's fiancé, because actually Barbara was Valdemar's fiancé. And at the time I was living in Canberra. And luckily enough, Barbara's niece, the fiancé's niece, only lived 2 hours away from Canberra. So I was lucky. I visited her home, and she was a mine of information. She had Valdemar's war diary, she had photos, she had letters. And also it was amazing that then when I met Valdemar's family in Malta, they actually had the same copies of photos that the lady in Australia had. But also the lady had photos of their family that they had never seen. And in fact, this story, it's really amazing because now the two families are back in contact again.
So how long ago did you start working on this publication? And after all, is there a message that you wanted to come through from this publication?
Yes, this has been a project long in the making, because I actually started the research about 15 years ago.
Wow.
But with research, it's hard to know when to stop. That was my main issue, because more information comes up and it's hard to know where you're going to draw the line. Now, there are a few messages that I would like to convey through my book. The first one I've already touched upon, which is basically that I wanted to give a voice to these men so that they're not just reduced to mere numbers or mere names inscribed on a cold marble. Another message is about the futility of war. because the First World War, everybody used to think that it's going to be the war to end all wars. Unfortunately, it wasn't the case, because in fact it created another war just 21 years later, which was even deadlier than the first one. So that's another message that I want to convey. The third message is I wanted to show Malta's role in the First World War. A lot has been written and studied about Malta's pivotal role in the Second World War, but I felt that there wasn't much out there about Malta's role in the first one. For instance, Malta's role as the nurse of the Mediterranean, how Malta and the Maltese welcomed with open arms thousands of wounded from Gallipoli, including a lot of Anzacs, and they were hospitalized in Malta, and unfortunately some of them lost their life, and there are about 300 war graves of both Australian and New Zealanders in Malta. So that was another message. I also wanted to highlight the strong links between Maltese and Australians, because I think this era of history, the fact that there were a number of Maltese that had migrated to Australia and they joined the Anzacs, the fact that Australians were welcomed in Malta, and also that a lot of Maltese, forming part of the Maltese Labour Corps, served side by side with the Anzacs in the Dardanelles. I think that continues to build upon our already strong friendship.
Definitely. So remind us the name of the book and when it actually comes out, where can we find it?
Okay, so the book is called Three Anzacs from Malta, a true story of friendship, love and loss. It will be published both as a print book and as an e-book as well, and it will be available in the next few months.